Hey, you're listening to the Burnt Out Entrepreneur podcast, where you'll learn why you're feeling so burnt out, some insights and hacks to get you along this entrepreneurial journey. I'm Kylie Yota, former oil and gas manager turned health coach, life coach, and business mentor for female entrepreneurs just like you, and help them heal and recover from burnout. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Burnt Out Entrepreneur podcast. Today, I'm speaking with Jamie Milam. She is a business system strategist, which, I love. That's totally my jam as well. And she's also a realtor, and she has her own podcast. It's called Determined AF. I love that. And she's a powerhouse. Like, having a podcast called Determined AF, like, she's definitely a powerhouse archetype. And I'm so happy to have her here on the show today. And in the spirit of burnout and being a realtor, right? I just want to share this with the audience. Did you know that 80% of real estate agents burn out in their first 2 years? And yeah, when I read this statistic, I was like, I could see how that happens. So Jamie was living on her own at age 15, and she became a mom at age 19. Shout out to, hashtag teen moms. And having to rebuild her life from a single Rubbermaid storage tote. Like, mine was a couple of FedEx boxes, but been there. And now she's earning a high six-figure income year over year, right? That's what we all want as entrepreneurs, right? We want to have that consistent income year over year. And she's one of those people, like, as a powerhouse, that she can do anything she puts her mind to. She's also been in sales for over 10 years, and she's helped develop departments for small businesses. And she now runs three businesses of her own. And she also works with groups and individuals to dive deeper into their goals for true clarity and really develop a purposeful plan with strategic systems. Yes, systems. Love it. To reach their goals and live the life they deserve. They desire and they deserve, right? We deserve to have an entrepreneurial life without burnout. We can create the things that we desire without burnout. And I'm so glad, Jamie, for having you on the podcast today. Yay.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah. So the question that everybody wants to know, how in the world do you juggle being a single parent and running 3 businesses?
Well, support, right?
Yes.
It's true, right? Support is the thing. Is so many people think that we do it alone, or they wonder, how do you do it alone? And the honest truth is we don't, right? And for me, when I say support, I mean, obviously, like, I have to reach out to my neighbor a couple of times a month, hey, can you help out my son? His car won't start, or his ride didn't come, or can you make sure that he's up? Right?
Yes.
So, I mean, that's support. The other thing too is automation and leverage, right? So when we talk about strategic systems, automation is something that is a part of that for me. And a lot of that has to do with my calendar. So I always say, if it's not on my calendar, it does not exist. And that is very true. I mean, I have forgotten to go to comedy shows with my girlfriends because I didn't have it on my calendar and I booked something different. I almost missed the Elton John last tour concert because I thought it wasn't on my calendar. Come to find out, it was on my calendar just for the following year. So, I mean, if it's not there, I literally will forget about it. And it kind of stinks that it's that way. But when you are running 3 businesses and you've got a kid and they've got all their things that they're doing, and you want to have a social life, it's got to be on my calendar. It's the only way I really truly stay organized. It's the only way that I can prioritize the things that are going to continue to get me into my goal. And then, of course, like I said, automation, right? Leverage in multiple ways. Do I do everything and clean my house? No, that's leverage, right? I'm going to hire a cleaning company and they come, I've got the regular people and they come because that's leverage for me. It's worth more for me to be doing other things than to take the time to do that, right? When I need to be with my son, I need to cut my time off, right? In other spaces. So it's also about creating boundaries. I think as entrepreneurs, especially when you're starting out, and this is the same for real estate agents, right? Because you're now in business for yourself. So nobody is sending that paycheck into your account but you, right? So when somebody transitions from, a 9 to 5 and they get into real estate, it's so much like, I want to create my own schedule. And really, it's like we're not actually doing that because we're running off of everybody else's schedule. And when they need us, and here's the thing is, I think scarcity really starts to play a big role, no matter if you're a real estate agent or if you're an entrepreneur. You start to say to yourself, like, I have to show up all the time. I have to respond immediately. I have to be available all the time. I have to book this at whatever hour they're available because I want to make sure that I have, that they see my value and that I get the sale or whatever that might be. And really, that's your fastest way to burnout. I recall very clearly the month, July 1st, 2020, I changed my voicemail on my phone as a realtor. So, COVID happened earlier that year. And up until then, I had been operating sort of like that real estate agent that was available all the time. I would write offers at 10:30 at night. Sometimes, a couple of times we were in negotiations until 11 p.m. And, now looking back, I'm like, who's making their best decisions at 11 o'clock?
Right.
It's a full day. And really what happened was after COVID's, lockdowns released, and now we could actually show homes again, floodgates opened in that market. And I was running wild. Now, I will say I went through a divorce in 2021. So I do know now in hindsight that I was using work as a real distraction from the struggles in my marriage. And I didn't know that at the time. But I feel like I see that now. And at the same time, I was so busy. I was so busy. And I remember summer of 2020, I was working with 5 divorcing couples at the same time.
Wow.
And I
not only just the transaction, but you're dealing with the other drama that's happening as well.
Oh, yeah. Put on your therapist hat. Like when you're a realtor, you are many things, not just helping buy and sell homes.
Yes.
And to make matters on top of that, even elevated more. One set was family. Another set was friends that lived a few doors down. Another set was other neighbors in my neighborhood. It was crazy. So when, you're divorcing and you've been going after each other for so long, it's really easy to kind of pivot that and direct it towards a third party. And so it was just a lot. I remember I was like, I have got to get out of town for the weekend. I'm going to go to the beach by myself. My ex-husband and my son, they came and joined me a couple days in, but I just needed to get away. And I remember I'm like, I have to change my voicemail, right? I have to start setting some boundaries here. And so I did. I changed my voicemail, and still to this day, it says, if you've reached me after 7 p.m. or on a Sunday or on a holiday, I will return your call the next business day. And the magical thing is when I started to have new appointments and I set that expectation with my clients, not a single one of them was like, yeah, we don't think we want to work with you because you're not available 24/7. Nobody said that. In fact, people said, you know what? I totally get that. You've got to have time for yourself too. We all need to take some time for family. Good for you. Those were things that I was hearing. And so now sometimes I still see agents that they kind of add that as their value add. I'm available 24/7. You can reach me any time of the day. And I just think to myself, like, well, when they reach out to you time and time again at 11 o'clock and you are with family or something, or it's a holiday and you express frustration, I hope you remember that you taught people how to treat you, right?
Yeah. So, going back to what you said earlier, who makes a good decision at 11 p.m.? And how are you supposed to advise clients at 11 p.m., after you've had a long day showing homes, being a mom, cooking dinner, putting all the dishes away, running the whatever, all the things, I'd rather have, an agent or a service provider who is in the office, in their element, and their brain is thinking about that one thing that I need them to think about, like during working hours. I mean, yes, I would like to be able to send messages to, my my realtor, my service provider, when I have an inkling or if I have a thought, because right, ADHD brain, like if I have a thought, I need to send it now or I'm going to lose it. But that doesn't mean I expect them to reply at that same hour, because I want, my service provider to be fresh and to be in the game when they're advising me. That's just my personal opinion.
No, I totally agree. And here's the thing is, like, I tell everybody this, like, you have to fill your cup up in some way, or else you're drained and you can't fill up anybody else's, right? And on top of that, what you're saying too is, and I get it, like, there's no way in the world that, my real estate business or anybody else's real estate business, unless you have a team, right, and you have other leverage members on your team, it's very difficult to not operate after 5 p.m. because a lot of people can't see homes. They work 9 to 5s. They want to see homes on the weekend, right? Here's what I want to say to that, though, is leverage, right? So when I decided that I don't want to show homes on Sundays or after 7 o'clock, if I have a client that is their only availability, okay, I just set the expectation that I have assistants that will help show homes for me so that they don't miss out and we can reach, we can meet them with their schedule. So I find the leverage piece. Here's another leverage system, and I know you're going to love this one because, again, I'm the type of person that after dinner, it's not abnormal for me to have my computer out. Now, if I need to respond or I need to send an email, then I have an extension on my Gmail connected called Streak. And with that, I can auto send, or I can schedule send, emails the next day. I'm still waiting for iPhone to come out so I can schedule my stinking messages, for future advance. I need it for the text messages because my brain will work at 11 o'clock or it'll work at 5 a.m. And, so for the emails, I can go in and I can schedule send those out because, again, it's about teaching people how to treat me. So if I verbalized to them and said, I don't respond after 7 o'clock, and then there I am at 10 p.m. responding to their emails, what is that saying? It's saying, well, Jamie does work after 7 p.m. And so those were the little things and tweaks that I started to do that would help my burnout, right? So that I could get my time back and I could feel like I can shut down certain times. The other thing is if I go out of town, I always set my autoresponder on. I change my voicemail then too, and it's not like, hey, I'm totally off the grid. It's just, if this is an emergency, reach out to my transaction coordinator or, send me a text message and I will respond within the next 24 hours. I'm giving myself time because people don't necessarily want instant response or instant information. They just want to know that they are heard. Communication is the key here. They want to make sure that you receive their message, that they're not just left hanging. They don't want to feel ignored. So when you can say, hey, I totally got your message. I will reach back out to you. I'm in an appointment, or I will reach back out to you by, tomorrow at 3 o'clock, if that works for you. You just set the next expectation. And it's a limiting belief to think that it's going to tick them off in a way that they don't want to work with you. That's a total limiting belief. And it's one of the biggest ways that I've created boundaries so that I can work in these different spaces, these different businesses that I'm in, and still be present with my son, go on some amazing trips, and still have a life, with my friends and, going and doing things and having some self-care time as well.
Yeah, I love that. And another thing that you've mentioned before is how important it is to have, a determination around mindset and how it played a role in your growth, both professionally and personally. Because I know on this podcast, we talk about entrepreneurship, but as entrepreneurs, let's face it, right? Our personal and professional lives are intertwined, especially if we are the personal brand of our business, right? There's kind of, this really fine line that delineates personal and professional. So yeah, just tell us more about your determined AF brand and how that really played a part in your development over the years.
Yeah, I appreciate you asking that because it really wasn't until probably this year. I had told a story. I told a little bit more of my story with my own coach around that storage tote, right? And she was like, Jamie, I can't believe like we've been working together. I mean, we've been working together since 2019. And she said, I can't believe when we've been working together this long and I didn't know this about you. She's like, you know, determination, it's clear it's played a role in your life for so long. And I've seen that, you know, in the last few years that we've been working together. And that is somewhat your superpower is you can see through the weeds, you see exactly what needs to be done, and then you just do it, right? You don't let anything get in your way when that's something that you want to be done. And I was like, yeah, like I need to sit with that. And that just so happened to be a conversation that occurred a little bit before, it was like the beginning of September-ish. And I always go away in October for a planning session for my next year. I go by myself to the beach. The beach is my peaceful place, you guys. So I go there. It's distraction free where I can really sit and focus on, you know, the direction that I'm heading in. How is it still playing a role into, you know, who I want to be or where I want to be in the next 3 to 5 years, you know, and what are the strategies that are going to get me there then? Well, what I realized is that engineering, specifically that reverse engineering, has played a role ever since I found out that I was going to be a mother. You know, what we didn't share in the intro was as a product of living on my own at 15, I also became a meth addict. And in that season of my life, that's where I was when I found out that I was pregnant. And it was this space that said, I can't keep living like this, right? Like, you know, thankfully I had a seed that was planted in me, you know, probably because of the years that my grandmother raised me between ages of, you know, 3 and 9, very strong, independent woman, you know, she's a total powerhouse herself. So probably that seed. The other thing too, is I've recently learned that it's also a part of my human design. I've got some specific channels that are open and gates that are open there that feed into that. So it might be innate. I don't know. It might be seeds. I don't know.
Right.
But either way, I just realized like I can't live like this and I have to do something different. And I was in quite the hole. I mean, I had some legal trouble. I had I ran away essentially. I left everything, you know, at home. I had a serious trauma. I actually had been raped a month before I found out that I was pregnant, which is a reason why I had left town and lost everything. And so I was really in a hole. It was, well, how am I going to do this? You know, I was living in a hotel room. I can't have a baby in a hotel room. Like, where am I going to go? And so I just had to start like crafting a plan. And it was just, I have to start making calls. And if people say no, then they say no. And it started off as very small steps. And I celebrated those steps. I mean, the first place that wasn't a roommate situation that I was living in was this small trailer kind of like in this junkyard. And we got to be there for free if we were just kind of like keeping an eye on the yard to make sure some of the equipment and stuff wasn't stolen. And it didn't even have like a working kitchen. I remember that the guy that I was dating at the time, he fell through the floor in front of the toilet one day. I was taking cold showers in December, pregnant, 7 months pregnant. And I asked my family, I said, you know, in lieu of any Christmas gifts, cash would be very helpful to help me get into another space so that we can get into a reasonable mobile home that, you know, I can bring this baby home to. And that place, like, it had holes in the floor and one in the window, but it had plywood over those holes. And the baby's room was already painted blue. And I'll never forget that, because some people would have looked at that and said, I still can't do it here. And instead, I just looked at it and said, this is better. This is better than where I was. And this is worth it. And here, look at it. It's already blue, you know, like it's meant to be. You know, was it still cracked? Yes. The next place was cracked too. The next place still had its struggles, but each place was a stepping stone of progress. And I celebrated that because I kept saying, like, I'm determined to continue to get to a better spot, so that in a way, I think I was trying to make up for all of the mistakes I had made over the last, 4 years or so. And maybe it was a feeling of not feeling worthy and, wanting to improve on that stance. Either way, it started off probably as survival and it just turned into a habit. And the habit has definitely paid off over time because I've been in multiple sales positions. I had to start off territories on my own. I used to be in medical sales. And then in real estate, I just really would go and knock on, other agents' offices, step in, I would call them. Like, I didn't wait to fail completely on my own. I wanted to fail forward faster and I wanted to learn through their failures. And so to me, the power of masterminding, the power of conversations like this, where we can hear what other people have done and tried and failed at, or use as a piece of success to create boundaries or to create systems, I think that it's just become one of those innate things that it's like, okay, let's celebrate the small things. And where is it that you want to go? Because if you have that vision and you want to get there, if you want to have that thing, or if you want to be that person, you can totally do that. Let's just reverse engineer it and see what's the timeline that you want it done in. Okay, that might depend on how much work and effort you have to have if you really want to have it in that time frame, right? Yeah. Or it may be way easier than you think, and we just reverse engineer.
That's the thing.
From that place. Yes.
Yeah, there's a lot of fear and anxiety because we anticipate that it's going to be hard. But when we get into it and we actually look at it, so there's this person that I followed. Her name is the Fly Lady. It's flylady.net. And she says, just set a timer for 15 minutes and see how much you can get done. So she helps people like clean their houses, whatever, and her business was built, or it's a business, but she just started an online forum for women who are coming out of depression, or like women who are stay-at-home moms and just needed a little bit of motivation. She had a Yahoo chat group, and she started this whole movement. And I started following her when I was a stay-at-home mom, when I was pregnant with my daughter, who's now 21. But she just says, set a timer for 15 minutes and unload your dishwasher. And lo and behold, it's like 2 minutes. She's like, see it. But she really wanted us to get in the habit of just starting. And it's really easier than you think it is. And like, there's all of this brain drama that we create around, like, oh my gosh, it's hard and whatever. And anyway, I love your story. And so thank you for sharing. Like, sometimes it's hard for us to share the vulnerable parts of our story, especially like when we're successful and we don't want people to see, the skeletons in our closet. I mean, I just wrote a book and it's out and it's published about my messy beginnings, and especially as a Christian woman, like my messy beginnings, and how that actually fueled me to do what I'm doing now. And so anyway, I appreciate you and your sharing your story and just being vulnerable and allowing us to see that it is possible to be determined AF, and that we can come out of the hard things and we don't have to suffer. And I know it's not always easy to do that, but sometimes it just takes something like setting a timer or making a to-do list for the day, like what's really pressing on you, and like those open loops that we create, right? It's like, oh, I have so much to do. Like, dude, just do a brain dump and just, tackle them one at a time. Just see how much you can get done in those 15 minutes, or whatever your process is. Actually, you do have a process that I wanted to bring up. So what Jamie has for you today in the audience is her 6 steps to building a strategic plan. And Jamie, if you can just go through the 6 steps that you take them through in that freebie, like real quick, so that they know what they're getting and they know how valuable it is.
Yeah. Well, and I want to say really fast, because you touched on this too, is like, we think that there's so much, or that it's hard. And it's often because we're really thinking we're thinking so big. We're thinking at that big picture view, right? And did I ever start, when I was 20 and say like, I want to live, and I visualize exactly the house that I'm in now? No. Did I ever think for the life of me that I would be where I am now? No. However, every year I just envision something a little bit bigger and better. And when that vision is so clear to you, then now you can see, like, I need to take these little steps every single day in order to get to that, if that makes sense, right? When you can clearly visualize what it is or who it is that you want to be, where you want to be, et cetera, then you can start to essentially, that's when you can start to take little action items. And oftentimes those little action items aren't even intentional. You don't know it. You don't know that you're doing that, right?
Yeah.
And that's what's beautiful about it, is that when you get really clear on what the outcome is or what your goal is and how you envision that, that's the first step, right?
Yeah.
Because when we can clearly visualize it, then we can start to see it and we start to become really connected to it. Anything else seems like a compromise to our own goals, right? And so that's the thing. And then now what we need to do is we need to get that down into like a written place. And I always love taking my clients through this because, I give them some journal prompts. It's not just like, why this goal, but here, let's journal on this. And I give them some very specific questions. And, even people who do not journal, they'll tell me like, it was tough because of some of the questions that you asked, but now I see, right? Yeah. And so we get really clear on what the goal is, why we're aiming for it, why it's important to us, what happens when we don't receive that, right? And then we start to kind of get it written out. And so we can then start to reverse engineer and brain dump. For some people, we need to brain dump it first. What are some of the tasks that are going to be required of us? What are some of the resources that we need to find? And we need to brain dump that so we can identify what needs to be accomplished along the way. And then what are the milestones? What are the time frames that it might take us? And that's really going to depend on whatever your goal is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because when and we do this there's a very systematic way, right? But it's how we break down that time frame for the long run, right? For some people, it's financially. And I'm just going to give a really quick example. So let's say that you decided that you wanted to, and I'm going to use a real estate example. You wanted to buy an investment property in the next 3 years. And you said to yourself, okay, realistically looking at my market, I want to buy a $300,000 house, right? Well, to get the best interest rate, I know I'm going to have to put at least 20% down. So 20% of 300, that's 75,000, right? Or 70,000. I can math really well. It's 75, right? So if I want to do that in 3 years, that's $25,000 a year that I need to put aside. So now we can take that $25,000 a year. We don't need to keep looking at the 3-year goal. We just need to look at the 1-year goal. And then we can break that down to see what that is on a monthly basis. Okay. That's approximately $2,000 or $2,100 a month. Okay. Now, is it possible? Do we have it in our budget for $2,100 a month? If it's that important to us, are there things that we can cut out? Or are there other ways that we can earn some income? And we can do this for a trip. We can do this for, income, right? Our goals for the next year. We can do this in so many different ways. Then what we need to do is we need to start to document, how are we going to do it, right? What are the strategies? Like, what's our top 3 priorities as to how we're going to accomplish this, right? Overview. And then we need to look at what are the strategies to accomplish that priority. And those strategies then need to be documented because we need to have metrics, especially if this is a business goal. And we need to have, if we have other people that are involved in it, if we have a team, or if somebody else's activities, are relied on in order to meet this, then we definitely need to have metrics, or else we don't know when everybody is actually accomplishing the goal, if we're on track for the goal, when we need to revise, when we need to pivot, what are the budgets for it. If we don't have it written down somewhere, then how are we going to reference back to say, yep, we're on track? Because if it's not a plan, then it's just a dream, right? So if it's a real goal, then the goal is going to have a plan. Otherwise, it's just dreaming and hope is not a strategy, right? So we need to document it, because especially if it works for you, right? And I say document it too. Sometimes I tell people, journal on how it's feeling, right? Like, how does that strategy feel? Because if you start to realize like you dread doing that one aspect of it, well, then that's not in alignment. And I don't want that to be in your strategies, because then you're not going to do it. So we need to pay attention to it. And if it's working really well, especially for our entrepreneurs and our business owners, if it's working really well, if it's not documented, it cannot be scaled. It can't be duplicated. You're going to be flying by the seat of your pants every single year. I'll give you a fast little side example of that. So I love automation, right? I love to use tags and, to be able to easily identify groups. And so I had some team members and we would be inviting past clients to events. And every single time they were getting ready to send out the invitations and they would export the mailing list, I was having to go through the mailing list to make sure everybody was on there, because I realized that sometimes current clients weren't on there. And I'm like, why are we not using this process? Why am I having to go through this line by line every single time? And it's taking up way too much of my time. Like, we have a process, follow the process, right? Or else people get missed, and then we can't scale faster. We can't just automate it. We can't relieve ourselves of the time when we already have platforms or programs, tools that can do this for you, right? Because then we can start to implement and then revise them. The other piece of this too is, especially if you've got a team, and when I say team, if this is a family goal, right? We want to go on a trip. My son and I just got back from Tulum, Mexico, and I did this exact same thing, you guys, I started in April of 2021, planning for this trip. And at the time, I didn't know if it was going to be April of 2022 or November of 2022, either spring break or Thanksgiving break. But it's still the same process. And so sometimes it's the communication hub, whether that's with your family members or whether that's with a travel agent, whether that's with team members. You need to have somewhere, again, especially if it's a team, that we can identify who is where in the process. Who have they been communicating with? If you guys are doing a launch or an event and you've got an assistant or a VA that is reaching out to people, getting quotes, trying to secure a venue or whatever, you guys, if this stuff is not documented and your VA leaves tomorrow, how are you going to pick up the pieces? How much time are you going to spend trying to go back in and figure it all out? Where were they at? Who have they been communicating with? I don't even know what the deposit is. So you have to have a communication hub, right? So this is all a part of like an overall scheme of system, right? In terms of how do we backtrack that? If it's the investment property, where are we tracking the financial amount of money that we intended to set aside into this one bucket, right? So that we knew where on track we were to be like, oh, shoot, I haven't transferred that into that savings account, in a couple of months. Well, now you know exactly how much you should transfer in order to stay on track. And here's the thing. Grace goes a long way, because we do pivot. I like to say that there's a roadmap, right? We create, as part of this system that I do with folks, is we create what I call roadmap to success. And I like to say that there's more than one way to get to your destination, right? When you're traveling somewhere and you drive, you might take a left turn. And oftentimes you feel like, oh, shoot, I took the wrong turn. And you do a U-turn, or maybe you go around the block, but you can get right back to where you were. And then you pivot, right? You redirect. It's the same when we're doing goals, right? So when we look at this, it's never, I don't know, I will say it's always surprising to me when a client says, like, well, when you break it down like that, I can do that. That's totally simple. And I'm like,
right.
Like when we break it down from this big goal, this big concept, this big idea, and it's like, well, how am I ever going to get there? And when we say, well, let's look at this down, let's get really finite with it. And then that way, anytime the distractions and the shinies show up for our entrepreneurs, and you start to see what everybody else is doing and it works really well, you can go back to this roadmap and you can say, but this is what was in alignment with me, right? And so when I go away in October and create my goals and do this, I do this exact same process and I sit with it. I'm very, very intentional to sit and pay attention to how I'm feeling when it's coming up, to go back the next day and review what I had done the day before to make sure that that's still feeling right. I wasn't exhausted. I wasn't just grabbing for things, because then whenever I am going through my regular weeks, when I start to see the distractions, or I start to feel overwhelmed and I start to feel stressed out because there's all these things to do, and I brain dump, because I am a brain dumper. I have lists, and when I can brain dump and check off my lists, I naturally will be able to see what was priority today and what can carry over. What was just, I feel like that I need to do that, or I want to do that. This is an idea. Yeah. You can start to naturally filter those in a way. But when I'm really overwhelmed or start to feel like I'm going in a couple different directions, I can pull up my tab, and I do keep it open as a tab now. I just click over to my tab and I look at my roadmap to success and I say, am I in alignment with these things? Am I doing the things that I saw that was going to get me where I wanted to be at the end of this year, that I felt truly aligned and really just genuinely connected to those activities? And if the answer is yes, then I'm like, perfect. I keep trucking, right? Because it brings me back to my purpose and my why. If the answer is no, then I'm like, well, now I know exactly what I need to be doing. I need to shut off all these other distractions. And then I come back into it. The other thing that I do is I do a lot of I do a lot of somatic work to pay attention to when I'm feeling overwhelmed, and give myself that break when I need it, or else you will hit overwhelm and burnout.
Yeah, definitely. For sure. I love how you broke that down. And I love how you broke it down for not just professional, but also personal. Because a lot of times, we'll set so many professional goals, and then when it comes down to the personal, we don't have any space to get any of that personal stuff done. One of my mentors, he talks about the 5-project rule, where you can only have 5 projects at a time per time frame. So 5 projects per day. But that also includes personal projects. So it's like a lot of times I want to carry 5 professional and 5 personal, or however it is, right? Mostly professional. And then we forget that the projects, and he defines a project as something that takes your time, energy, and attention. Mm-hmm. So look, we just got a new puppy a couple of months ago. So that's a lot of time, energy, and attention going there. And I'll tell you, the first couple of weeks that we got her, I'm like, oh gosh, I'm not doing anything. It's like, well, where's all your time, energy, and attention? It's puppy training. And so, like you said, grace is so important. And so, like, for those of you who are listening, like, yes, where are your time, energy, and attention being, spent? And then you have to evaluate, is that in alignment with where you want to go? Like, is that taking you in that direction that you want to go? That's your goal, right? In any, right, we should all have GPSs on our phones these days. So, right. And when you're talking about, when you plot your course, you just enter the address, plug it in, and then Siri will give you 3 different options.
You have a focused direction. Yep.
Yeah. And then you can choose, okay, I want to go this way, I want to go this way, or avoid tolls or whatever, she'll give you a couple of options and you pick one. And then if you get off course, she will reroute you. Mm-hmm. And even if, say, you don't have a coach or you don't have a mentor, as long as you know where you're going, right? Old school maps, we forget old school maps. I mean, you won't automatically be rerouted, but yes, can you take out your original, like you said, the roadmap to success, and be like, okay, where did I veer off course and how do I get back? And you can, plot your course back to your original goal because you have a roadmap in front of you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that because it is so true. And additionally, when you talk about the grace, it's also remember that there's a counterbalance. There's no real such thing. We're all chasing, a balanced life. It's really a counterbalance. More of your time, money, energy, and attention are going to go to one thing over another. And that was a big, I do want to briefly mention that I was hitting that burnout. As I said, I didn't realize I came out of a divorce, and I didn't realize, I certainly wasn't expecting that a realization was going to be that I was using work as a distraction from my marriage. And so that included a lot of hustle and bustle. And after our separation, a few months later, I still kept in the hustle and bustle. And then about 4 months later, it was starting to bring other aspects of joy in my life and activities. And I was like, oh man, I don't know that I want to work, a 10-hour day today. I don't even know if I want to work a 6-hour day today. And then there were moments that my son would be, would need something. Either I had to take him in because his ride didn't show up or whatever before he got a car. And, I'd be frustrated. And then I'm like, hang on a second, this is where I got into business for myself so I can do this. right?
Yeah.
And so I started to kind of relieve. And there are moments because, I've been mentoring and I've been training for years, even in sales. I was national director of sales with my former company when I was in medical sales. And this year alone is when I stepped into an actual, coaching paid, business. And even then, it's like, there are moments that I say to myself, am I pouring into this as much as I know that I could, because I know what I can build in a certain amount of time, like I've done in my real estate business. And I say to myself, like, you could. It's just that you're going to give up some of your time. And is that what you want to do? And so now I say, you know what? I'm willing to take a longer time frame to build as big as I did in my real estate, because I'm choosing to take time for myself and incorporate other spaces of joy. And that for me, when I bring back awareness and ownership to those choices, it reminds me. So when you do have to play with the puppy, or you have to take the puppy out, you say, you know what, I wanted the puppy and I chose to have this puppy, and I am choosing right now that my attention is going to that. And I still am working my top priorities in these other areas, right? It's just a counterbalance between the two.
Yeah, I love that.
And again, this can work for you and any sort of like strategic planning process. The roadmap to success is a part of my system. It is a part of my systems audit. I've just found that every one-on-one client that I've worked with, we've almost always needed to start there, because they don't have those things documented or they're not. There's not clarity. There's not focus, surrounded with it. It's a one-pager, that 6-step system on my website, which you can download for free at any time. Absolutely. And you can also, if you can find me on Instagram at Ms. Jamie Milam, Milam as in Mary at the end. And in my link tree there in my bio, you can also find that freebie download as well.
Thank you so much. I mean, like everything that you shared on today's broadcast is already gold. And is there one final thought that you want to leave with our audience and how to avoid entrepreneurial burnout?
Yeah, an environment, right? Find a support system. Entrepreneurship can feel lonely, especially if you're doing this on your own. When I said I used to knock on doors in my office and step into places and ask agents before me, if you're not in an office space and you're at home, and, COVID definitely brought a lot of that online virtual work, which has been a blessing for many. And at the same time, entrepreneurial space can be lonely if you don't have a support system. And so finding a support system, somewhere that you can bounce ideas off of, that you can ask what others have tried, what systems they're using. Most of the time, these things can be, applied in multiple industries. So that's my main thing. I would definitely say is, give yourself some grace, create that roadmap for success, get really clear on what your goals are, why you're doing it, break it down. And especially, like I said, find an environment of support, whether that is, a podcast, whether that is, come and hang out with us on Determined AF, or if that is also, finding a mentor or a coach or a group community. We've got one called Successful AF Community. It's a private membership, and we discuss a lot of systems and strategies for foundational business building blocks with all sorts of entrepreneurs. So, that's the main thing. Find yourself a community and stay engaged, because you're going to find the current encouragement, motivation, and the relatability that you can do it too.
Yes. Thank you so much, Jamie, for being here today. And I can't wait for you guys to go grab that freebie and start planning, because I know, with a lot of clients who come to me, that's what's missing, is that strategic plan. And I'm so happy that you have this free resource for everyone.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for having me too. This has been a blast.
Yay. Okay. Thank you again so much for tuning in, and stay tuned for another episode of The Burnt Out Entrepreneur. Bye.